The smell of grapes ripening under the Tuscan sun is still the first thing I notice when I close my eyes. I can feel the damp earth between my fingers as I used to help my father inspect the vines. "Isabella," he would say, "these grapes tell stories, each one holds the history of our land." Little did I know then that storytelling would become my life's work, just not with grapes, but with a camera. My name is Isabella Ricci. I was born in a small vineyard town near Florence, Italy, where time moves slowly and traditions run deep. Now, at 52, I live in Los Angeles, where I've spent the last 20 years making documentary films about immigrant experiences in America. The journey between these two worlds wasn't straight or easy. It broke me, rebuilt me, and showed me what I was made of. Growing up, our family vineyard produced modest wines that sold locally for €57 a bottle. We weren't rich, but we lived well enough. My father wanted me to take over the family business someday. My mother secretly slipped magazines about fashion and film under my pillow. "Look beyond the hills," she would whisper when my father wasn't listening. "There's a bigger world waiting for you." I spent evenings watching old American films on our small television. I'd stay up late sketching storyboards for movies that played in my head. When I told my parents I wanted to study film, my father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. The argument that followed shook our stone cottage. "Films? What do you know about films? Your life is here, with the vines that fed generations of our family," my father shouted, his hands stained purple from the harvest. My mother stood between us. "Let her go, Antonio. The vines will wait." I left for Rome with €2,000 saved from summer jobs and a suitcase full of clothes that weren't nearly fashionable enough for the city. I worked 3 jobs while studying at a small film school. I learned to shoot, edit, and tell stories with light and shadow. America wasn't part of my plan until I met Michael, an American film professor visiting Rome. He saw my student documentary about elderly Italian immigrants returning home after decades abroad. "This perspective needs to be in the States," he said, sliding a UCLA film school application across the cafe table. "Americans think they understand immigration, but they don't." I arrived in Los Angeles on a crisp January morning in 1999. The airport was massive, the highways wider than any road I'd seen. I had $1,500 in my account, a student visa, and an apartment share with 3 other international students that cost $650 a month. The city overwhelmed me. Everyone seemed to drive 80 kilometers per hour toward their dreams while I was still trying to figure out the bus schedule. In film classes, American students spoke confidently about their vision. They had grown up with Hollywood in their backyard, while I struggled to explain my ideas through my thick accent. "Could you repeat that?" became the phrase I heard most often. At night, I called home from payphones that ate quarters faster than I could earn them. My father had softened. "The vines miss you," he'd say. "They don't grow the same without your music." I almost went back during my 2nd year. I was working as a waitress, a library assistant, and occasionally as a production assistant on student films that paid nothing but offered credit. I lived on pasta and coffee. My visa would expire soon, and job offers weren't coming. On particularly hard days, I'd drive to Santa Monica Beach, just to stare at the ocean and cry where nobody could hear me over the waves. My turning point came unexpectedly. While serving coffee at a small cafe near campus, I met Elena, an elderly woman who spoke to me in Italian after hearing my accent. "Where are you from?" she asked, eyes lighting up. "Near Florence," I replied. She grabbed my hand. "I left Naples in 1952. Never went back." For the next hour, she told me about coming to America as a young bride, working in factories, losing her husband, raising 3 children alone, and never learning to drive in a city built for cars. "Nobody has ever asked for my story," she said as she left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I grabbed my small digital camera, all I could afford then, and went back to the cafe the next day. "Would you let me film your story?" I asked Elena when she returned. She agreed, and over 6 weekends, I followed her through her life. She introduced me to her friends, other Italian immigrants who had built lives in Los Angeles. They opened their homes and photo albums to me. They cooked for me while telling stories of discrimination, loneliness, triumph, and resilience. I edited the footage into a 30-minute documentary I called The America They Found. It cost me $120 for tapes and a few props. I submitted it to a small local film festival focused on immigrant stories, not expecting much. It won first prize, $5,000, and a meeting with a producer from PBS. That first success didn't make me rich or famous overnight. The PBS meeting led to a small grant to expand the project to include immigrants from other countries. I worked on it while still serving coffee and taking small production jobs. For 3 years, I filmed on weekends and edited at night. I interviewed 78 immigrants from 23 countries. Each story shared common threads: hope, sacrifice, disillusionment, perseverance, and the complicated love for both their birth country and their adopted home. An Armenian grandfather showed me the 3 photos he managed to save when fleeing with nothing else. A Mexican mother described crossing the desert carrying her baby for 18 miles. A Vietnamese refugee who became a neurosurgeon performed free surgeries every month for uninsured patients. America didn't give me anything for free, he told me. But it gave me a chance, which is all I needed. The expanded documentary, American Threads, aired on PBS stations nationally in 2006. Letters poured in from viewers who saw their family stories reflected on screen. Universities requested screening rights. Immigration advocacy groups used clips for education. I finally got my green card through a talent visa after 7 years of struggling with temporary visas and uncertainty. The day it arrived, I called my parents. Now I can come visit without fear of not being allowed back, I told them. My father was quiet for a moment. We always kept your room ready, he said. Success didn't solve everything. The documentary film world is financially precarious. I've lived through times of recognition followed by months of scrambling for funding. I've filmed while ill because rescheduling would cost thousands. I've edited in airports, hotel rooms, and once in a hospital waiting room. My work has taken me to migrant camps near the border, where families lived in tents with no running water, just 42 miles from million-dollar homes. I've filmed in sweatshops where immigrants worked 14-hour days for $4 an hour. I've sat with undocumented students who graduated top of their class but couldn't legally work. These experiences changed me from observer to advocate. My films began focusing on solutions and action. I partnered with legal aid organizations to hold screenings where immigrants could get free consultations. I worked with community colleges to create scholarship funds for undocumented students. My father finally watched my work when I screened American Threads in our hometown in Italy in 2008. The local cultural center was packed. When the lights came up, I found him wiping his eyes. Those people, he said, pointing to the screen, they remind me of my grandfather who went to Argentina and never returned. You've given them a voice. He died the following year. I used my festival award money to help my mother keep the vineyard running. 20 years into my career, I've completed 8 feature documentaries and numerous short films. My work has been shown on 4 continents. I've received death threats for some projects and awards for others, sometimes for the same film. Last year, I returned to Elena's story. She was 93 now, still living independently in the same small house. I filmed her meeting her great-grandchildren, teaching them to make pasta by hand while telling stories about growing up in Naples. In America, I was always the foreigner with the accent, she told them. But you children, you belong everywhere. The final scene shows her watching old home videos of her late husband on a tablet, technology that didn't exist when she immigrated, operated by fingers that once sewed clothes in factories for pennies per piece. This simple moment captures what drives me, showing how ordinary people contain extraordinary stories of adaptation and resilience. The path from that vineyard girl to Los Angeles filmmaker wasn't what I imagined. I never became the next Fellini. I didn't win an Oscar. My name isn't famous. What I did build was a bridge between worlds. My work lives in universities, community centers, and streaming platforms where it helps people see each other more clearly. When students approach me after screenings to say, "That's my grandmother's story," or "I never understood my parents until now," I know the struggles were worth it. I still visit my mother and the vineyard yearly. I bring California wine as a joke, and she pretends to be offended. The vines my father tended still produce grapes, though my cousins run the business now. Sometimes, walking among those ancient rows, I wonder about parallel lives, who I would have been if I'd stayed. Then my phone buzzes with messages from across the ocean, production questions, interview requests, or notes from people whose stories I've told. You can leave home to follow a dream, but home never fully leaves you. It becomes the lens through which you see your new world. If you're standing at a similar crossroads, weighing dreams against tradition, security against passion, remember, your unique perspective is precisely what the world needs. The story only you can tell might be the one someone else is waiting to hear.